welcome to the Literature Cafe. So recently I came across a sentence by Wittgenstein that read, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." And that stayed for me for a while, because what he actually meant by this is that every thought, and thus every insight, every point of access, every understanding of the world can only ever be conceived within the boundaries of our own language. So there's no thinking outside of language. Yes, of course, you can feel, one can see beauty, one can feel love. But the moment one tries to communicate, to think, to grasp an idea, it can only happen within language. And then in our fleeting existence, however, language also gives us a certain anchor points. Its words and sentences bring our life into concepts, into definition. But of course, this also brings a problem, because as humans, we try to label everything, every feeling with word, and by doing so, we no longer truly perceive the thing itself, but only the concept, the term we use to name it. So there's always a tension between what we express in words and sentences and what it actually is. And language then is the tool of our thinking. Wittgenstein even called it our vehicle. It is through language that we first encounter the world, and it is in language that we establish a connection to it. And language, therefore, sets the boundaries of our horizon completely, and that makes sense, because it's simply impossible to formulate a thought within words or without words, without sentences. You can try, go ahead and give it a shot, but it just won't work. I can promise. We are always trapped in the prison of language and have to learn how to move within it. Language as world perception, and people have even spoken of a tyrannical rule, so something the book 1984 vividly illustrates, namely the staggering power that language actually holds, and the influence that linguistic form exerts our own understanding of our society. Our perception then is far from objective, whether it is guided by the terms we use. And in 1984, the replacement of words like good with ungood, or opponent with thought criminal, or even past with old think, shows masterfully how language can reshape our entire architecture of reality. So the way an observer perceives the world depends not only on their state of motion, but, and perhaps even more, on their native language. But why did all this set me thinking? So, because for me, English is a foreign language, obviously. So German is actually my mother tongue. And anyone who has ever learned a new language knows the feeling. Your horizon expands dramatically. You begin to think differently, to understand things in a new way when you learn another language. And that's incredibly enriching. In fact, I study philosophy and other subjects in English, and I run this YouTube channel in English. But at the same time, though, and this is the flip side, when one speaks only in a new foreign language, it can also feel limiting compared to one's native tongue. The horizon narrows. You don't have the same breadth of vocabulary, the same range of possibilities. So the boundaries in general are tighter, and you can't move as freely, playfully, or effortlessly within it. And especially in subjects like literature and philosophy, the goal isn't merely to use language as a tool to be understood or to make true or false statements, as it might be the case in mathematics or computer science. Now it's not about the information, but about the effect. It's about how something is said. So the emphasis, the tone, the pace, the pronunciation, or even the choice of words, like all the filler words that I use, also the tools we take to express what we mean. That's what matters, like all those subtle curves, those condensations, the intimacy with what one says. And that's basically what I mean when Kleist once described in his text on the gradual construction of thoughts during speech. And what this text means, and by the way, I will link it in the description. I can highly recommend to take a look. It's actually a pretty good text. That thoughts don't always pre-exist fully formed in our minds. They often only unfold through the act of speaking. In talking, reflecting, and formulating, those hazy fragments begin to take shape. And then straight line thinking and planned expression can take us far, for sure, but they often miss the essence of what really matters in disciplines like literature and philosophy. Because with every use of language, a new meaning arises, one that resonates and also interacts with our way of life. And then language isn't just a vehicle for thought, it actively shapes it. And that's precisely also why philosophy isn't something that can happen in an ivory tower. Only through discourse, through putting our thoughts into language, can a truly creative and active thinking process only emerge. And I think everyone's experienced this also in everyday life. So sometimes it only takes another person asking one question or tossing an idea into the conversation, and as you respond, the words seem to arrange themselves. Suddenly ideas begin to flow, ideas you didn't even know you had. And also language don't just differ in what they allow you to express, but in what they require you to express. For example, if I say in English, I spent yesterday evening with a neighbor. It may raise the question, was it a man or a woman? But I also have the right to politely say that it's none of nobody's business. In German, though, I don't have that option. The language forces me to choose between Nachbar, so male neighbor, and Nachbarin, which is female neighbor. And there are countless examples like this. So a language often pushes us to be more specific, especially German, or to phrase things differently. And when a language accompanies us from early childhood, its structures and also the habits of expression become second nature. These habits go beyond language. They shape how we think and how we perceive the world around us. And when our language trains us to habitually pay attention to certain aspects of experience, that very habit can sharpen our sensitivity or those details. And can also encourage specific kinds of memory, certain patterns of association. And that, of course, plays a fundamental role in shaping who we are, in shaping identity. And lately, I've become more and more aware that a foreign language, as much as I appreciate English, can never achieve what my native language, German, allows me to do when it comes to stringing sentences together and letting thoughts gradually take from form for speaking. And I know that saying this, I might make myself quite unpopular with some and more appreciated by others, depending on whether someone speaks English or German. But it's exactly because of that that I've decided to switch from English to German in my upcoming videos. But this also means that this is also, and most of all, a love letter to the German language. And that's also why I see deeper danger in the increasing use of AI tools like ChatGPT, because here that creative process, the act of forming and shaping thoughts through language, is no longer given space to unfold. Like everything is being smoothed out, flattened and standardized. And I'm absolutely not against ChatGPT or other forms of AI. I think that they're a great way to study and so on. But I mean, when everyone uses these AIs to write a text, the whole understanding, the whole connection to language is totally lost. I mean, you can also see that when you read an essay, a paper, or even a CV from a student today and compared to a paper or an essay back then. The whole personality of language, the whole all these nuances, they are all lost. And also when you kind of listen to old radio shows or interviews, when you interviewed a young person or person in general, that it'd be I mean, they could express themselves so well. And I mean, people also exist these days, but I think it's really rare. So this whole linguistic depth is really, I would say, in danger because of these tools and short messages. And here, again, like language isn't about saying everything perfectly or repeating something memorized. I mean, that might earn you a decent grade at school, for sure. It can also Be good sometimes to recite a polished sentence here and there, but in general it has nothing to do with real thinking, with the kind of aesthetic, creative and nuanced speaking that I personally care about. Like, for example, to demonstrate that, the German sentence, wo bleibt sie bloß, can be roughly translated to where on earth is she? It's not the best translation, but yeah, let it be like this. So, and this question might be from a concerned mother that might ask a friend because her daughter is late getting home. And the little word blows doesn't add any new factual content to the sentence at all, but it expresses worry and gives the question its emotional weight. And without blows, the plain reply, "Sie so, where is she?" lacks that emotional undertone. It becomes a neutral quest for information rather than a reflection of fear that something might have happened. And this shows how crucial even the smallest words, so the so-called particles, can be, because they give language depth and connection. But to notice and use these little words, one needs obviously a deep intuitive feeling for language, first of all, because only with that sensitivity can you really perceive such nuances and consciously play with them. And it's also my aim to create an aesthetic use of language here and there, and for that, spontaneous is obviously really essential. It's the only way to break free from the rigid everyday use of speech. And I mean, language is everything to me, at least. I mean, I love play with it, to see it as a vehicle and to know how to hold the wheel firmly. I want to live in language, move with it, shape things through it. And of course, that's possible in a foreign language too. I mean, but aside from a very few rare individuals, it will never ever reach the same depth or familiarity at one's mother tongue. And as much as I love English, German will always be for me the language of poets and thinkers. And I think I German, even if much of my environment is English speaking, even if I read and study in English, and even if I travel to English speaking countries, my deepest connection remains with my mother tongue, and it's in German that my thoughts unfold most freely. German is often judged yeah, harshly. I mean, when you travel, you can really see the reactions. People always say, oh, it's difficult, awkward, or long-winded, or also harsh sounding. But in reality, it holds an extraordinary richness of expression. All these nuances, and these unique qualities. A work by Goethe, for example, can never fully have the same impact in English as it does in its original form. So the rhythm, the sound of Goethe's Knittelverse can only be perceived in German. All these idioms, metaphors, wordplays, they all risk being replaced or also lost in translation. And but I mostly read in German literature and philosophy, and especially in those areas, it all comes down to nuance. Without that, I couldn't reach the depth I long for. When I think in English, it always feels like a translation from the German, and with each translation, a tiny, sometimes only a tiny but essential part of the original thought gets lost. You can't not have this. That's something I feel deeply. And honestly, it hurts. It makes me quite sad, because sometimes also angry, because it means I'm always giving up a part of myself, and that part is too important to simply erase. And probably anyone who studies in a foreign language or lives abroad will probably know exactly what I mean. There's always this hope, this longing to one day feel the same deep connection, the same sense of identity in the foreign language that you have in your mother tongue. But over time, you realize it's a path with no real end. And at best, it remains just an approximation. So I hope you, as if you're an English-speaking listener, you stay with me, at least with subtitles. So thank you so much for listening, and see you next time here at the Literature Cafe.